Coming to you live from deep within a globalist radioactive wasteland. We're the survivors of the alt-right kek-pocalypse. The few, the brave, the bitchy, once more wading back into Canadian politics hordes with Rantzerker number, just give me a second here. Oh, this is going to actually be more difficult than I thought. Number 243, why Canadian politics should matter to Americans. Now that's sort of a bit of a bland general title, but I didn't know how to define everything, you know, the wibbly wobbly that we're dealing with, the fart in the general atmosphere of politics today. But what I wanted to sort of look at is how politicians, specifically politicians on the quote unquote left side, the liberal side in Canada, how they use feminism to essentially define the narrative and what that could mean for other political systems, including like the American, you know, and also look at, again, my theory that Carney and Trump are splitting the pig, with Carney going to the EU and net zero policies and maybe deindustrializing the Eastern Canada, and Trump taking over, or at least gaining the benefit of the resources in Western Canada and to the ends of, I guess, American supremacy and the AI, and the future of the AI economy. And that's a lot of stuff. Guys, if I'm not making any sense, just say it in the comments and I will, I'll try to explain. Do I make any sense, Karen? Please come in and.
Okay. Maybe I'm just not as cynical as you are. Okay.
Perhaps not.
I do think that Trump would happily take Alberta and Saskatchewan off of Canada's hands, right? And make us a state. He won't take the entirety of Canada because Canada's a bunch of fucking libtards who, you know, like, it'd be basically giving him California plus another 2 electoral college seats, right? And if like, this 51st state thing was like such a load of crap. I don't understand why anyone took it seriously that Trump would even want that, considering if he did
not
that,
all of Canada.
If he took all of Canada as a 51st state, which would be extremely difficult to do, right? And I don't think any of the states, and I don't think Congress would go for it, right? And the states would have to vote for it. 75 states and 2/3 of Congress would have to be in favor for them to do that, right? And if they did that, there would never be a Republican president or a Republican majority House or Senate ever again. Like ever.
Yeah.
So, like, you'd have to be a fucking moron to think it was anything but a joke to humiliate Trudeau, who he detests, right? In front of a whole bunch of important dignitaries. And then the joke got out and everybody's hair caught on fire, and
but that's how it works. And you put the idea into the noosphere.
And the 25% tariffs that were Trump's unreasonable opening gambit, his opening offer. He always starts with something unreasonable, and then that way everything that he subsequently offers looks more reasonable in comparison. Right? Why am I echoing? Anyway,
are you echoing? Okay, guys in the chat, is she echoing?
It's echoing in my ear. Anyway, instead of the 25% tariffs being the unreasonable opening offer, now the 51st state thing is the unreasonable opening offer, because we took it seriously, because, well, not we, but retards in Canada took it seriously. And any reasonable, Poilievre failed on this one, right? He failed on, instead of shaking his fist and saying Canada will never be the 51st state because, you know, we value our sovereignty. He should have just said, kids, like, settle down, grow up, right? Take a deep breath, right? Canada's not going to become the 51st state because we would vote Democrat every election.
Well, like I said in my previous suggestion, it wouldn't be that Canada becomes the 51st state. And I'm not sure if, I mean, again, I'm not sure if this is going to happen or not. Sorry, I'm under attack by a void cat, so I need to bait her somewhere else.
But like you seem to be thinking that like Trump is going to be some kind of robber baron who's going to like basically drain Alberta dry, like, you know, in the movie There Will Be Blood, right? You know, he's just
that was me accusing you guys, Alberta. But why not? Like, honestly, if we're dealing with a complete liquidation of the current economic order, all bets are off. And if Trump wants to position the US as the next economic superpower using AI, which I think is sort of what's going on here, as I showed you, like the one of the tech bros that doesn't really show himself very much. He talked about how, you know, you need the resources. Well, right up above on the north is the resources to feed the engine of AI technology. So, I mean, between the two, if the US actually, especially Western Canada, again, Eastern Canada is a bit of a, you know, like it's going to cause them to always vote Democrat. But Eastern Canada plus the US, and the US has an advantage, it has a head start in AI technology, would probably ensure some kind of US ascendancy for another 250 years, or maybe just 50 years. I don't know, depending on how long this all plays out.
Well, sure, but I just don't see it as cynically as you do, right?
I don't know.
Like,
is that cynical though?
Okay, he wants our resources. That doesn't mean he's going to come steal them.
Well, is that stealing?
Well, he's going to buy them.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that there's necessarily going to be like a invasion. It may just end up being a closer economic partnership. Maybe the East to the West cedes, becomes its own thing, so we don't have to constantly ask Ottawa, which
permission for everything.
Permission for everything.
Can I dig in my garden, Ottawa? Would that be okay?
Yeah. We don't have to constantly ask, or alternatively, maybe we continue with federation, but the provinces with these resources, which are going to become a bigger and bigger player in the global political landscape as the economies change, like the provinces with these resources will be able to develop more autonomy or create a more autonomous relationship with Ottawa. Because the thing is that Ottawa is very close with this kind of net zero stuff, which basically means that going forward, you want to pursue deindustrialization, and you want to pursue a reduction of productivity in your country, because you want to be able
they've managed to achieve that. Yeah, they've managed to achieve almost net zero productivity, net zero freaking revenue, net zero GDP growth. You know, we've increased our population of, you know, belching, farting, methane producing, freaking carbon dioxide exhaling migrants, right? And but yeah, we don't have the additional productivity to show for it. Nobody's better off than they were 10 years ago. No.
But like I said, the whole focus with net zero is a reduction of the carbon footprint, and then what Canada's greatest export will be carbon credits. So, and you see how there's this very strong divide. In fact, you could almost say that
and Carney stands to get rich off the carbon credits for sure.
Of course he stands to get rich off of that.
But he's got a huge part of his portfolio sunk into companies that have high quality carbon credits to sell.
Yeah. And there's becoming this sort of moral divide between people who want to pursue a net zero strategy, and they want to sell carbon credits, they want to deindustrialize, they want to reduce production. And then the other side of the equation is people who want to pursue an economy more in line with what we historically thought of as an economy, creating products, using resources, improving people's standards of living rather than massively reducing it, which, let's face it, the net zero people are going to massively reduce people's standard of living. That's why they'll,
get back in your pod and eat your bug burger.
Yeah, and don't, you have
Ready Player One.
you'll have what are they called? Curfews. You'll have restrictions on your movements. You won't be able to travel. Basically I think the COOF stuff might have been a planned rollout of that. But we're seeing a divide between the people who embrace that because it is in their mind moral, or maybe because they feel threatened by other people's freedoms. I don't know. And then you have the other side that wants to go to more of a traditional economic model of productivity, of using resources to create marketable goods. And I think that's the real split. You can call it right or left, but I think it's between two economic models. And
not even economic models, but energy models.
Energy models, especially. And what's interesting about Canada is we're sort of like a case study in that split. We have the East that is definitely going towards a net zero kind of idea, and then we have the West.
That's central Canada.
Right? Central Canada.
The Maritimes are like even
Eastern Ontario is more along now that kind of old school economic model.
Yeah, well, look at what happened. The Conservative candidate after the judicial recount flipped a seat, Terra Nova, I think it was. In Newfoundland, I believe, and he was just like, yeah, because we're sick of being told that we can't hunt seals, and so the seals eat all the fish, so then we can't fish, right? And he's just like, yeah, no, we have to actually manage our resources, otherwise they're going to manage us, right? Just like California and refusing to clear out deadwood, making a typical wildfire into like a cascading feedback inferno, right? Of greater and greater flames that just is self-sustaining. Because he won't let anybody do controlled burns. He won't let anybody freaking clear out the underbrush, the deadwood. He won't let anybody log, right? And it's like, yeah, okay. So most of that's federal land, but even on federal land, right? They have to abide by California regulations. Right? So it's like, and they're like, well, we should never cut a tree down. We should never use up anything that is that can't be replaced, right? And it's like, what do you think fucking rare earth minerals are? Like, what do you think is going to happen to all of this 30 pounds of cables, computer cables and stuff that we've accumulated over 15 years, right? Okay, that I'm going to take to the eco station and they're going to be recycled. Yeah, probably not. Probably not. They're going to sort through them. They're going to decide what's hazardous waste, like batteries, and what's, not hazardous, like, I guess, fiber optic cable or Cat5 cable. And whatever's not hazardous is going to go into the fucking landfill, and everything else is going to be shipped to India, where they can recycle it, which probably just means that we're renting their landfill space because they're probably just going to dump it and bury it, right? And it's like, and rare earth minerals are a finite resource, like more so than trees. Trees replace themselves.
So, but essentially what we're looking at, I think, is a split. And I mean, you could, like I said, it's two ways of utilizing natural resources. One is don't, and the other is let's continue to do it. And I think this is like fundamentally the split that we're seeing economically and a lot politically. And this, honestly, like throughout human history, most of the splits between people have been as a result of different people exploiting resources in different ways. Like this is something that, I see historically, that if people exploit the same resource, they tend to come together, they tend to intermingle, they tend to understand each other, they tend to create the same language because they need the same words for the same tools, for the same plants, for the same minerals, for the same techniques, right? So they tend to have an affinity for each other when they use the environment in the same way. And then if there's a big schism between how they use the environment, for example, between the steppe people of like the eastern Eurasian steppe and the settled pastoral, no, actually the settled agricultural peoples of Europe, and then you have the steppe people sweeping in and taking over, and there's usually a lot of conflict between different economic groups and different ways of using the environment. They don't usually get along. So what I'm seeing is that Canada has sort of become a battleground for these two economic concepts. And I think that, again, and I don't think it's cynical at all. I'm just looking at it like I'm just looking at it and giving my analysis of what I see. Somebody is eventually going to use the resources in Western Canada. That's what's going to happen, because part of the problem with the net zero, like how they want to exploit the environment, is that it leaves them militarily vulnerable. It leaves them economically vulnerable. And it's also a very elitist, if you think about it, it's a very elitist form of economy, because you are selling carbon credits at the level of nations. Who benefits from that? Well, there's no benefit for your citizens to have better quality of living if you're selling carbon credits. The benefit is to the person who's selling them, the person who controls them, the person who controls policy. So it's like you want to sell people on this, but you want to use kind of very moralizing language, very alarmist language, because that makes people embrace a self-destructive narrative. And what I mean by that is the best way to reduce carbon, let's face it, is the Canadian Made program.
Yeah.
Now that's cynical.
That is cynical. Okay, and you mentioned that you thought COVID was like a trial run or a rollout of like, of that. I don't think that was, I don't think it was an intentional trial run. I think it was, okay, because I know why they locked down, right? Everybody threw away, because we all had pandemic playbooks, and none of them included lockdowns. None of them included these like tight restrictions and everything, right? All of the Western countries had something more along the lines of Sweden, right? Which was targeted protection, right? Targeted mediation at, to protect the vulnerable, and pretty much let everybody else go about their lives, and just ask them to maybe be a little more careful, like maybe choose not to get the entire family together, extended family together for a reunion this year, right? So, like that's how they did things. They didn't close the schools for K to 12, right? They basically, they just kind of took a very easy, simple, the approach that we were all going to take, right? And then something happened. We discovered something China was doing, or had done, which was clean us out of all of our medical supplies, right? So they stopped exporting to us. Oh, no worry. Don't worry about your shipment being late. No worries. We just found, the inspectors found an unusual number of defective and counterfeit items in these shipments. So we're just trying to nail the problem down. Shipments will resume any minute, right? We'll fix the problem, and it'll be good soon, right? And at the same time, they mobilized an army of Chinese nationals living and working abroad to buy everything off of our retail shelves and even out of our warehouses, and ship it to China. Right? And this wasn't discovered until, well, it was uncovered by Australian media, March 31st, 2020. Well, when did we all lock down? About 3 weeks before that, which is when our governments would have discovered that we were screwed, which is why you had these, right, one after another, right? I'm looking at a video of a guy in an empty hospital parking lot, right? There's like tumbleweeds blowing through the ER. Half of the floors are dark, right? And he's like, this hospital is not overwhelmed. Like, what is going on? Right? We're being told our hospitals are being overwhelmed at the same time. Like, and then I clicked to the next video and it's a frontline healthcare worker using a modified garbage bag as a PPE gown. Right? And it's because of what China fucking did. You know, and
so they were worried that they didn't have enough. So they started
they did not have enough. They did not have enough. And not only that, they could not tell anybody. Because if you think anti-Asian hate incidents spiked during COVID, you'd better believe there would be a whole bunch if everybody found out about this, you know, sort of grassroots CPP or CCP orchestrated astroturfing purchasing campaign, right? Because Chinese people, Chinese nationals, right? If you don't do what your government tells you to do, even if you live abroad, right? They'll hurt your family.
Yeah.
So they'll punish your family back home. So you do it. And it's just like, if that had gotten, so like, it was around June, July, right? After everything had kind of died down and things were starting to open back up in sane places, that Pete Navarro, he was one of the advisors to Trump, started talking about it on Fox News about like, the only medical export coming out of China for the 6 weeks ending, February 29th was COVID.
Well, look,
right?
Okay, so average Joe
even after they banned travel between Wuhan and the rest of China, right? They still allowed international flights out of the airport.
So average Joe says, leave Canada alone, maybe. Are you actually Canadian? Because people in the west of Canada are getting really tired of Ottawa setting policy and deciding for us how to manage our resources. This doesn't happen in the States. Like, each state has a lot more autonomy from the federal government. So it's at this point we're like, well, could Ottawa leave us alone?
It's and Ottawa is actually encroaching on our sovereignty in Alberta, right? Because like as Danielle Smith said, right, just because it's called Crown land does not mean it belongs to the federal government. The Crown land in Alberta belongs to the government of Alberta, right? Now, the national parks belong to the federal government. The military bases belong to the federal government. The native reservations belong to the First Nations people, right? Who are managed, or they have most of their dealings with the federal government, and they're governed by the Indian Act, which is a federal act. But all the other land in Alberta is Alberta's land. It's not the federal government's land to tell us what we can and can't do with it, right? That's just been a new thing, right? A new thing, right? And I really feel bad for the Maritimes because that is federal jurisdiction. The ocean is federal jurisdiction, right?
Yeah. Well, and like there's a lot of tensions that are going on in Canada because of this clash of economic. I want to call it economic rather than just resource. It's also like often economies also have like almost a religious component to them as well. So the whole idea of the rain dance, or the local pagan priest blessing the crops and stuff. I mean, there's always this kind of religious component because we rely so much on these resources and we want a sense of control, and the religion gives us a sense of control over our lives. So it's like it's not just an economic model, it becomes a religious model, and it becomes a model about what we value. So for the climate change people who are part of that model, this net zero model, they value this kind of idea of a untouched earth, almost without human involvement whatsoever, which is just, I mean, is that something that is good necessarily? Is it driven by a true desire for something more positive, or is it driven by a hatred of other humans? I don't know.
Well, this is one of those things that I think people often fail to understand, and it's another way that humans think they're special is that we are not freaking We don't consider ourselves animals. We don't consider ourselves part of the ecosystem, right? Part of, we almost consider ourselves aliens who colonize planet Earth, right? And
Exactly.
that we don't belong here, right? The Earth belongs to everyone, every creature, but human beings.
But us.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, I mean, if you buy into the Gaia hypothesis, then we are just as much a part of the Earth as anyone else. And our processes might actually are also just a part of the Earth. Maybe Gaia, woke up and said, I want more trees. Deploy the humans.
Yeah, and maybe Gaia woke up one day and said, you know what? The fact that these birds are building nests and these spiders are building webs, they're changing. They're actively changing the environment for their own benefit. And I don't like that. Right? Because Mother Gaia doesn't like anybody who changes the environment. That's not to say that we should harm the environment, right? I'm a big fan of recycling. I'm a big fan of, separating the garbage from like the stuff that can't be recycled or composted, right? So, so you have very, very minimal stuff going into the landfill and the rest is going into composting. And then they like make these big, huge piles of compost and then they sell it, turn it into dirt and sell it. Right? Like that's great. It's high quality dirt too. But, and that's why I happily, even though I have to hold my nose at times, deal with my green bin. Right? Because it's like, well, this is what you do to take care of the planet. This is what you do. You don't take your food scraps and your yard waste and put it in bags and stick it in a hole in the ground lined with plastic and put a sheet of plastic over top of it and build it layer by layer until it's all full. Like that's not how you should be a good steward of the planet, I guess, or steward of your own environment. Right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, let's there was a couple more concepts that I wanted to go over, specifically looking at how we use a feminist narrative to take our political discussions from systems and actionables to emotions, and how when we do that, we become it's very easy to sell us on things that are not very good for us. I don't think that Carney is necessary. That's the current Prime Minister of Canada. I don't think Carney is very good for us. I've heard that some of the people who voted for him have actually realized that he is snowing them. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I know that like Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they have been fooled. But the thing is that this man will say anything. He will perform any kind of emotive, like try to perform so you generate a particular emotion in order to get what he wants. And that's, I mean, how can you trust somebody who at the same time as he was saying elbows up to people in Canada, he was removing the reciprocal tariffs on the US and probably talking to Trump about it.
Yeah, no, before he was even elected.
Before he was even elected.
He was already prime minister because he was elected by his party to take over the leadership role. So he was the interim prime minister. But he wasn't elected by the people as prime minister until April 28th. And so like a week before that, he just quietly dropped almost all the reciprocal tariffs on the US. And then but then he kept on talking about how he was going to stick it. He was going to be real tough with Trump, right, on the tariffs. And he was going to be like, yeah. And nobody knew until after he was elected that he'd done this, that he dropped most of the tariffs. And the only ones that he kept are on food, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was already, and we saw when he had that discussion with Trump that they're very cordial with each other. And so that just sort of disappeared. So what he did was, in the moment, he sold a complete fiction that he himself didn't even believe in, which was this idea of going toe to toe with Trump. And
which was never going to happen no matter who got elected.
Yeah, but that's the thing. He sold an emotion. If you're
Yeah.
looking at this situation logically, systematically, in terms of actionables, you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But there was a whole bunch of people who weren't looking at this situation logically, in terms of systems, in terms of actionables. They were looking at it in terms of, I want to feel a particular way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm
mad at Trump. I'm mad at Trump, and Carney's promising to make him cry.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to punch the bully. And it's like, anybody who is looking at this from a perspective of, again, reason, logic, and stepping through things would have said, yeah, that he's promising something that he cannot deliver. And not only did he promise something that he cannot deliver, he was in the process of undelivering it as he promised it.
Yeah.
Like, this is so deceitful. And I'm going to keep going back to this over and over again, because this is the kind of schism that really scares me in the politics, because people will vote for someone and the people who did look at that and they will get angry at me for pointing it out, not at him for doing it. And it's like, that's the scary part. This guy suckered you in. And how can you trust him that he won't just say whatever you want to hear, perform whatever emotion you want to feel? Meanwhile, he's working behind the scenes to benefit himself at your expense, or even benefit Trump at your expense, the hated Trump at your expense. Like, how can you trust that? And it's like that there's a whole bunch of politics, and this is why I was describing this fart. There's a whole bunch of politics now that's completely driven by just a feeling and emotion, not even like a threat narrative, just an emotion in the moment. He makes me feel in the moment this way. That's why I'm voting for him. And then when you bought that feeling, the reality is that you've bought someone who does not care about you at all, who's willing to engage in this kind of emotional manipulation to hide what he's actually doing. And he does the exact opposite. Like, how does a mentality like that work? To my base in Canada, I'm going to go elbows up. To Trump, I'm going to be like, yeah, I'll kiss the ring. It's how do you have that lack of integrity, and how can anyone trust that lack of integrity going forward? And it's like,
because none of the fucking media that these people watch were reporting on it, right? Like, like when you have to go to a YouTube channel called Moose on the Loose to get your news on Canadian politics, right? Because that's the most accurate you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just some guy in his kitchen on Vancouver Island with headphones on, watching videos and commenting on things, and then in the rest of his time he goes digging for, all of the Cayman Islands, Brookfield Asset Management. Carney owns $7 million worth of stock shares in that. Well, they have headquarters in the Cayman Islands, in Bermuda, in the Isle of Man, all these notorious tax havens that have helped them since Carney was on their board of directors, and they opened these things while he was there, right? That have helped them dodge $5.2 billion worth of taxes payable to the Canadian federal government, right? And what are they invested in? Oh, they're invested in all these green credit selling companies, right? Oh, and they're invested in Modular Group, which is going to build those pods where you're going to be able to eat your bug burger, and Ready Player One, right? Okay.
Yeah. And this is the thing. He sells an emotion in the moment. And I wanted to show you this. This woman is not, well, she might be feminist, but she's called Jasmine Lane. She's like Moose on the Loose. She's a commentator on Canadian politics. I find her to be, I usually spend time listening to her because I think I
find her voice to be a little bit over the top. She's kind of got a Tommy Lahren. She channels a little bit of Tommy Lahren. In terms of
not too much.
Well, in terms of, like, I guess maybe I do that too, but in terms of kind of shouting everything she has to say.
Okay, but anyway, what she has to say here, I think she's identified an issue in politics, and we're going to discuss where it actually comes from.
Oh, you got to turn it up.
Okay, let me turn it up.
autonomy, and those are all things where you say these words and they make people feel a type of way, but there is absolutely no clear or even actionable policy changes to achieve what would actually need to happen if the crisis was as bad as he claims that it is.
Okay, so what she's describing is Carney,
he's a net zero zealot, climate
he's a net
change.
zero zealot, but he has addressed his cabinet. He's finally addressed the parliament, but I believe that parliament's only going to be in session for a couple weeks. Then they're going on a 3-month.
2 weeks. I think it's 2.5 weeks on, and then 2 months off.
3 weeks, I think. 3 weeks on after this week, and then
so
2 or 3 months
Parliament
off.
hasn't been in session. Hey guys, Parliament hasn't been in session in something like
Canada hasn't
6 months. We hasn't
had a government in 6 months.
Yeah.
Nobody really noticed until they started to screw with us again. But we haven't had a sitting government for 6 months.
They're going to be back in session, and they're only going to sit. They're only going to sit for something like 73 days for the entire fucking year, right? And I think this is like the fewest number of days that Parliament will be in session since 1937.
And it's a huge crisis.
And it's an existential crisis. The Trump thing.
So this is Carney has also said it's not just Trump. It's the okay. So what's happened is in Canada, just to give you a heads up, we had a horrible situation with the Liberals, a loss of any kind of economic future. There's no mobility. Housing prices are through the roof. They're actually worse than in the U.S. And actually, the average income of the average Canadian,
the lowest per capita in the G7. Yeah,
but also the average income of the average Canadian is lower than the income of Americans in Mississippi, like the lowest. Like we are poorer than the poorest Americans.
Yep.
So I mean that's the state of the country, and that's what happened in the last 10 years under Liberal leadership under Trudeau. Trudeau got replaced by Carney. Carney put in basically the same cabinet, and then he talked about the problems that cabinet under Trudeau, which he was part of. So he was actually the finance minister under Trudeau. Correct?
No, he wasn't the finance minister. He was Trudeau's top economic advisor.
Oh, he was the top.
He couldn't be a minister because he wasn't an MP.
Okay, so he was the top economic advisor. Oh God, this guy's never been elected by any writing. This guy was the top economic advisor for the man who made the disaster that he says is an existential crisis for Canada. And then he put together the same cabinet that oversaw that disaster and said, we're going to fix it.
Yep.
And basically his solution for fixing it is to take the conservative platform.
Yeah,
but
no, he stole a whole bunch of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and then add in, but we're going to do all of these wonderful things without compromising our morals at all. And you know what ends up happening is you only can have one master. A slave can only have one master. So is it the economic prosperity of Canadians that is Carney's master, or is it net zero? My money is on net zero. So wherever there is a conflict between the economic prosperity of Canadians and pursuing net zero, Carney will choose net zero, and he will say he's doing it for our benefit. And we will agree with him because that's the narrative.
Okay, but back to the point. He says we have this economic crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Existential economic crisis that, his party and the guy he was advising created over the course of 10 years. So he's got to fix that. Okay. And it's going to take a lot of work, right? We're going to have to do a lot of big things at a pace never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody, let's go on summer vacation.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And then on top of that, okay, we've never experienced a threat, from outside Canada, like Trump and his tariffs and his trade war, right? It's a crisis. Okay, let's go on vacation. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then on top of that, climate change is an existential threat and a crisis. It's not a climate climate change issue. It's a climate change crisis, right? Okay, everybody, let's go on vacation, right? Let's sit for fewer days. And the guy, he's like this economic genius, okay? He wasn't even going to table a budget this year. We haven't had a budget in 2 years.
We're just spending with no oversight at all.
With no oversight, with nobody actually looking, being able to look at, here's our plan for the next 12 months.
The
right?
fact is, Canada isn't a country. What the hell are we?
We're a fucking clown show.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Everybody's like, "Oh, Canadians." It's like, well, what? We don't have our parliament decides to sit. Our government is the avocado toast job of governments in the world.
Yeah, no, and he could force them to sit all year. He could force them to sit 5 days a week, every week for the rest of the year.
What
right?
What does it matter? I mean, we only need. They're gonna solve all of this shit in 3 weeks. You know what? Just actually, honestly, if they never made another decision, that would probably be for the best, and then just let the premiers of the provinces do everything. You know, like just screw off completely.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, his costed plan, right, that he presented during his election campaign. It's literally, it's everything that Trudeau spent money on, plus $133 billion more.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, okay, how's that going to lower the deficit? How's that going to shave down our debt? Because it's not about how much debt you owe. It's not even about debt to GDP. It's debt to per capita GDP, right? And our debt, like Trudeau spent more money. He magicked more money into existence through borrowing and through printing, right? Quantitative easing, right? More money into existence than all the previous prime ministers during his 10 years, than all the previous prime ministers combined.
But
right?
Yeah. And now
and you can only say but COVID for so long, right? Because but COVID doesn't work anymore. We need to get back to work. We need to start paying down our debt.
Yes. But anyway, the point that I wanted to bring out is that she's noticing the
same thing. She's
noticing the same thing. She's noticing that the Liberals are selling people feelings. And when this happens, you're being snowed. The thing is, like, I'm a really weird person, and I know that. And it's because I hate being sold on feelings. It feels like somebody's trying to take advantage of me when they sell me on feelings. And what I've noticed is that average people, they get sold on feelings, and that is when they are taken advantage of. And I know that these kinds of narratives, you sort of lubricate the day. They make it easier to get through your life. It makes it easier to deliver information that people are not going to like without them tearing your face off and all of that stuff. Like, I get it. It's like, it just makes life move better. But for me, I've always had an adverse reaction to it. So I sort of notice it instantly. But it's good to see that other people are starting to take note, because when somebody just sells you on a feeling, when they use these vague actually, you know what? Let's just let Jasmine say it.
All of this language is meant to appear as though he is the adult in the room. He is the powerful one, without actually providing any details, without providing any actual outcomes with his ideas. And I've read his book, Values. I actually just ordered a physical copy of it so that I can highlight it and read it on the show for you guys.
Staring into a crowd of
unsubscribe
tasked with figuring out the perfect message for each customer.
Just a second.
Stop trying to manually A/B.
Unsubscribe.
I love
she's
you.
Reading that.
But his ideas have been terrible. Fans, total failure. Net zero, total failure. ESG, total failure. But he appears as though while using.
I actually had to look up what net Z fans was, and it's like some kind of financial arrangement around net zero. Where is it? I'm sorry. I'm under attack by Void Cat. I can't help it. Voidcat is demanding attentions. Yeah, this is getting a little bit difficult, but I did find out. So the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, GFANZ. Oh my God! Just a second. Let me continue this. Like, everybody went to hell here. Just a second. Here, I'll play it.
His credentials as though he is the one who's going to help us. Meanwhile, his ideas have failed, every single one of them. His book Values is a nightmare. Like, there's nothing in there that is actually more than a theory or an idea. And it makes sense because he had actually said in writing his book Values, if I'm remembering the quote correctly, that it was that book where he was inspired by Karl Marx. And Karl Marx is somebody who wrote a lot of crazy things that then many years after he died were applied by what then became Stalin, what then became, the North Korea, what happened there. And it was so to me, the way that I envision Mark Carney is that he is somebody who really wants to be remembered, who really wants to make a global impact on the world. Mark Carney is an activist. He is a radical. And he is trying to push that onto Canadian people who were none the wiser, because most people don't do their research, unlike you, of course. But I do also want to say, like the comparisons of Canada's situation today, like the Berlin Wall, like World War II, there is absolutely no comparison outside of those that are self-serving or superficial, because Canada's economic issues, yes, they are very serious. They're not even remotely comparable to wartime devastation or authoritarian regimes and collapses and what that does to the world. So the words that he is using are completely designed to manufacture urgency and not at all to inform. And they're also just not even valid. Like, that is insane talk, buddy. And most importantly from all of this is the simple fact that all of the other countries who are doing exceptionally well right now, what have they done? They have unleashed what works in their countries. Canada, on the other hand, has muzzled all of those industries, shamed all of those industries and the people in them, the people who support them, to try to test out this idea that doesn't work. There is data showing you that it does not work. Why doesn't Canada just do the same as every other country?
Well, I mean, the thing is that what do you mean by work? Do you mean, does it make people increase the people's standard of living? No.
But, even if you only looked at it in terms of CO2 emissions, it can't work, right? Because, okay, so let's say you got Katie Hopkins barging into a field of pasture land, beautiful pasture land, right? That they're digging up so that they can install solar panels on the ground, right? Okay, so they're taking this carbon sink, okay, and they're going to turn it into just a field of solar panels, right? And which will remove its carbon sink status. And then on top of that, okay, so where do we get the solar panels from? Right? Well, they get shipped in big cargo ships from China, right? Across the ocean in cargo ships that run on diesel, right? That run on fossil fuels, right? And then when the solar panels wear out and need to be, I don't know, salvaged or whatever you can do in terms of recycling, right? Because they're full of toxic materials. Then you stick them on another cargo ship and you ship it off to India, right? Or some other developing country that's willing to bury it in the ground and forget about it. And, and taint their own freaking groundwater, right? And okay, and how much, what's the carbon footprint of even these big, gigantic electric self-driving mining trucks that China has just debuted, right? Okay, well, where are they getting their electricity from to recharge their batteries? From coal-fired power plants, right? To mine the minerals to make these freaking solar panels, right? So it's just like, how is this reducing like, we contribute 2% of the entire world's fucking carbon. We share, just like viruses don't respect borders, right? Neither does the atmosphere. The atmosphere does not respect borders, right? So we could drop ourselves to absolutely zero emissions, and it would reduce global emissions by 2%, except for the fact that we'd have to get rid of a whole bunch of carbon sinks to do it, and we'd also have to ship in fossil fuel guzzling cargo ships everything we need to produce it from a country that lives on fossil fuels, that does everything with fossil fuels. Like, there's a reason China's not trying to be net zero. There's a reason they're not investing in any of these green. The only thing that they're investing is the money it takes to build the factories, to make this shit and sell it off to freaking idiots like us, right? That's their racket, right? They don't use solar panels. And I'm not dissing solar panels. They make sense at times. You know, those street signs, you know, with the flashing lights and stuff that warn you when the underpass is flooded or whatever, right? You know, and they often have like a little solar panel on them. And it's like, well, that's helpful, right? That's helpful because then you don't have to run a power line underground because it's a temporary sign, right? But
yeah,
it's like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, but like this is fucking retarded. It's not even going to reduce emissions. It might even increase emissions if we switched 100, and it kills the whales and it kills the fucking bats and it, you know, and then, oh, we got these big mirror ones out in the desert, right? These big mirror generators, right? Where the mirrors are all in concentric circles pointed up towards a big collection thing that heats up, superheats salt until it's liquid, right? And then they use that to generate electricity, right? And I'm like, yeah, you ever see a bird fly over one of those things? They just burst into flames in midair.
Okay. I just want to point out.
I'm sorry. All of this is damaging to the environment, right? We have decided collectively that CO2 is the only pollutant that matters. Plant food is the only pollutant that matters to us.
Yes, exactly. Like it's crazy, but and like I said, maybe Gaia decided that she wants bigger and more lush forests. So it's like deploy the humans. Okay, but
well, yeah, okay, but if you want to bring down carbon and all other types of pollution,
plant trees.
Don't own so many shoes. How about that?
Yeah, it could reduce consumption considerably. Maybe reduce your financial expectations on men, because financial expectations equal carbon footprint. So, you know, start liking the guys who are really creative but don't make money, I guess. Can entertain you in your pod. But yeah, it's like there is this kind of and I think there's another aspect to it, because we are dealing with a huge economic shift. We're at sort of at the end of like almost like an economic life cycle, and people don't know what comes next. And so what I think they're looking for is purpose, and they're trying to find it in retooling the world to use as little energy as possible. And so that gives them a sense of purpose. It gives a drive to what they do. But is it possible? Is the solution feasible? Is it just make work? Like the reality is that at this point in time, the reason why people consume as much as they do, it now is required to maintain the population we have. So the only real way to achieve net zero is not, you know, the G word, the geocide word.
Yeah, well, okay. No,
But
I don't think so. I mean, like even looking at Jasmine's nice home here, right?
Yeah.
You know, like it's nice. And if she keeps it that way for the next 10 years before she replaces her curtains and her furniture and her carpet and all of that, right? And all of her accessories and things, you know, that will contribute overall to reducing both toxic and carcinogenic pollutants in the world and energy consumption. Right? I mean, like that's just how it works. The less you use, the less you consume, the less impact you have on the environment. Right? And it's just like, so, you know, in terms of there are some things that you have to replace, right? But I've got a bench in front of my window here that the dogs sit on to look out the window, and all the upholstery's gone from the top. It just got torn to shreds, so I just like frickin' cut it off, and now it's just bare wood. And I guess if I had company over who would judge me for something like that, I might replace the bench and it'll just get wrecked again and I'll just have to replace it every 2 years. But I'm happy leaving it as it is. I don't need more than one pair of shoes, one pair of boots. Actually, 3 pairs of shoes. One pair of barefoot, and you should all look up hike footwear barefoot shoes, because they're amazing. Barefoot shoes, one pair of mules to just zip out and take things out to the garbage, and one pair of barefoot winter boots, and that's all I have, and that's all I need. I have 2 pairs of jeans. I have 16 tank tops. I haven't bought any new clothes other than 2 pairs of jeans and 3 tank tops to replace the old ones. In 2 years, right? Like I don't buy what I don't need, right? And I don't have to refresh my furniture. We need to actually have spring
but that also reduces the economy.
Okay, sure.
Because the thing is that what happened is we had to supercharge consumption because our jobs moved from building stuff to selling stuff. And in order to have enough people with jobs selling stuff, and that includes marketing and advertising and all of that other stuff, like the top middle management above the product, in order to have enough jobs for those people, we had to buy a heck of a lot more than we ever did.
Well, but maybe instead of buying a pair of Wayfair cabinets for in my dining room, to flank my window, maybe I will actually have a cabinet maker make them.
Yeah, maybe. And
out
then
of solid wood, none of this particle board crap. But then you'll have
to, that'll have to be your forever cabinets. But I wanted to get to
and they will. That's why I would do it that way.
I wanted to get to a point because I wanted you guys to listen to this. This I believe David Creighton, Stand on Guard, is more of a conservative commentator. And I just want you to notice what he doesn't address, because again, we're talking about a political landscape where emotion has become the currency. So you can have a leader who essentially sells his constituents on an emotion in the moment. Meanwhile, there is no authenticity. Like he's literally doing the opposite thing of what he's selling, and nobody comments on it because apparently it's good enough that he gave them all a particular feeling in the moment. And this kind of mentality, I would say, is feminine. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
This is very feminine, and it's feminine because in a lot of ways, it's like that video. It's not the nail, right? It's the feeling of the nail that matters. It's the feeling of
talking about the feeling of the nail that matters. Complaining about the feeling of the nail that matters. Right. Yeah. I just need you to listen and understand where I'm coming from. Right.
Yeah. 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 So we get this ascendancy of politicians who lie to our faces because we now have a gigantic voting bloc that wants that. They want the feeling in the moment. And when people come in and say, what about the actionables? What about the system? What about the impacts? They say, well, that's far right. It's just the feeling in the moment. I want to feel like I'm saving Mother Earth in the moment. That guy with the destroy Mother Earth gigantic nuclear bomb that he's put into the center of the earth is going to blow the entire earth up. But he made me feel like he was going to save the earth in the moment. That kind of thing. There's no sense of, and it's almost like this complete detachment from reality and an addiction to a manufactured reality. Carney is manufacturing a reality for his female voter base. Right? He's manufacturing this idea of himself, and they're buying that without looking at the reality of who he is and what he's doing. And as we go forward, and this is not, let me clarify, this is feminine, but it's like teedy.
It's not confined to women.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not confined to women, but it's like teenage girl feminine.
Yeah, no, it's basically, it's like Black conservative perspective. Greg Foreman says, Democrats are the party of low testosterone men and high calorie women.
Okay. Ouch. But my point is, like, could you imagine a society that revolves around the interests of teenage boys? Like that would be our, like, that's our moral guidance, is whatever teenage boys want. And anybody who's listening to me now is probably wincing and thinking, oh, that'd be awful. But we have a society that revolves around the interests of teenage girls. And the reason why I say that is because women are not encouraged to move out of that desire for flattery, that desire for the emotion of the moment, that inability to look at the structure, the consequences, the accountability. That there's nothing encouraging women to grow out of that attitude. And in fact, there's all kinds of stuff that's keeping him that sort of, I don't know.
They get rewarded for it. Yeah. Stunted.
Stunted. And a part of it is because we want them to play a particular role in our society as like these puppets in the male savior narrative and all that other stuff. So and it's not every woman that ends up like that. We got Danielle Smith. She put out a tweet and she's trying to drag all of the fart that Carney has put out, all of these lovely words and this kind of emotion and this performance, and she's trying to drag it into actionables, right? And then we have the throne speech from King Charles, which is more just abstractions and emotional words and let's get together and merge and be one. And again,
and catalyze, and
and Daniel's like, okay, are you going to deal with this list of specific projects and issues, right?
Yeah.
And that's so it's not necessary. It's not male. It is sort of male versus female, but not quite, because if women actually get past this desire for living in a feeling, this desire to be flattered, if they grow out of that teenage stage, they're fine. Usually they have a lot more competence. They've had to deal with stuff. They've either had to manage a business or had a job or had kids or something, or dogs. I don't know.
Well,
but anyway,
you look at how she handled the tariffs, right? And she basically just came right out and told the hard truth, right? Like, I'm going to do what I can to convince him that it's not in America's interest to punish Canada with tariffs, right? With tariffs that, but we're probably going to have to get used to there being some tariffs, right? That's just the way it's going to have to be. And because, he has a plan for his people, and, but I'm going to do everything that I can to convince him
manage it.
What's in his interest, where it's in his interest to remove those, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's how an adult behaves.
Yes. Yeah, that's how an adult behaves. Now, what Carney has done is no actionables, all just a lot of effusive stuff and cribbing from the Conservative Party, but not giving an indication that he's really going to prioritize that.
Yeah, he's not going to follow through on it.
Yeah, on his net. Well, certainly, because he doesn't, like, 3 weeks. Then they're off on vacation. They're not going to do a damn thing, which may be for the best. If they just permanently go on vacation and never come back, Canada might be better off.
He'll just keep spending money every quarter through orders
with no
council.
Oversight. But we're just the piggy bank for them. I get that. Like, if we could cut them off and kick them out, like, can we just have like a separatist movement and just it'll just be again out of Ottawa. Let's just put Ottawa on its own island in the Pacific. Or something.
That would be great.
But anyway, so but my point is that this is something, and it's because we have absolutely abdicated the idea that we need to hold women to adult responsibilities. Like, we absolutely, we would never, everybody who probably heard that was like, yeah, nobody would want to live in a world where it was ruled by the primordial instincts of, 14-year-old boys. But that's what we have because we don't expect women to take responsibility for people other than themselves. We don't expect women to take responsibility for being moral monsters just like men. You know what I mean? Like you have the capability of doing evil if you're a woman. You need to take responsibility for that. You have the capability of using your influence for bad because you're a woman. Where are these narratives? They're all subsumed. They're folded into this narrative that women are always lesser. They always have nothing to take responsibility for because because
you know they don't have any power, and so because
nothing
they don't
to take
have any
responsibility
power. Yeah, and it's like, well, and then you try and explain to them, you know, how female power works, right? And then they're like, "Oh, that's just objectifying us as sex objects and virginal objects and maternal objects."
So right? What? But that's still the power that exists. Like this is that they have so many words that feminism has given women so many words for remaining teenage girls. And so we have given women a lot of political power that nobody can question. Yeah. And this is the bizarre thing. It's like when we still had these narratives of responsibility, what did women do? They voted conservative almost invariably until they were broken by feminism saying, no, you don't get to be mothers and wives anymore. That's bad. And like
the government will pay you to not be.
Yeah, I'm fine with like career women. Like I think that actually, I think you'll find that running a business or being a mom are probably the two ways you become most conservative or at least more fiscally aware as a woman. Like, but because you know, I have talked to women who don't have children, but they have been very involved in business, and they also have criticisms of average women's behavior. In not taking responsibility for their jobs and the people around them. And then they, you know, it's like, you have to be able to shame women. You have to be able to blame women. You have to be able to hold them to accountability. But here's the thing. This is why I think conservatives fail at this, right? Oh, shoot. I think Voidcat just destroyed my camera. Give me a second here.
No, he didn't.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta reset it or something.
I was just getting to the thesis. God damn, Voidcat. Why do you have to have so many shenanigans?
We can still hear her. But
yes, you can hear me because my sound does not go through my webcam. Okay. Let's see if I can make this work. Sorry, guys. You asked for Voidcat and you got Voidcat.
Why would anybody ask for him?
Her. I don't know. They were like the investors of IHBR demand more.
Sometimes you just have to tell your investors no.
Okay, well, there you go. That's you wished Voidcat into existence, and she came, and she destroyed, she consumed, and she she consumed and created chaos. She consumed order and made chaos. All right. So what I was trying to get at is this. Let me find it right here. Listen. This is Carney's address to his cabinet, and just so you guys know, it's exactly the same as Trudeau's cabinet.
This is the room.
No, to his caucus.
Caucus, right?
This is real work. This is the room that won our party a strong mandate at the most crucial time in our nation's history. 8.6 million votes. Who's counting? 8.6 million votes. The largest, the most votes in Canadian history. The largest. Yeah. The largest vote share for the Liberal Party in nearly half a century. The largest women's caucus in our history. The largest.
Of course.
Hey.
Why would he want the largest women's caucus? So he can have the most amount of his constituents who respond to his absolute exploitative bullshit. And also, it's not just women. Like I said, it is the particular narrative of the women's caucus.
Well, this is this is why I like, okay, if women were not allowed to vote or hold office, we would not get a Danielle Smith, right? That 1 in 100 women who hold office, who's actually, we wouldn't get a Margaret Thatcher, right? We wouldn't get, one of these women through history who've been responsible and reasonable and, adults. Okay. We wouldn't get any of those, right? But we wouldn't get any freaking what's her name? Jolie. What's her freaking name? She's in Carney's cabinet. We wouldn't get Elizabeth May, right? We wouldn't get a bunch of women who basically all they do is base their decisions as parts of, as voting members of the government, who just base everything on feelings, right? So it's just like, I'm sorry, but I'd be willing to sacrifice the 1 in 100 in order to not have to put up with the other 99.
I'm gonna take a bit of a different tact. First of all, our previous political systems, feudalism, aristocracy, ended up having more women than this current one. But the other thing is that, again, I don't think it's necessarily women. I think it's the flippin' women's caucus and the narrative around it. Because the women's caucus is all about women being victims.
Well, there shouldn't be a women's caucus.
No, there shouldn't.
Why would there be a women's caucus?
But there's a reason why this is the first thing he says to his caucus, right? He is laying the groundwork, the religious groundwork of moral superiority. He is laying down the groundwork for the narratives that he uses. And nobody wants to talk about this. I'm sure Jasmine Lane doesn't want to talk about this. Maybe Danielle Smith doesn't want to talk about this. The fact is that this constructs this problem of not just women, but women who are inculcated into a narrative of victimhood, constructs it like terraforms the political landscape and leads the way to carnies who simply sell emotion in a moment, and that's it. And then everything else is self-interest or actively working against his constituency. Right? This is what creates the emotion in the moment. This is what creates the hunger for security that he's playing off of. She talks about a crisis narrative. Where does the material, the kindling to light that crisis narrative come from? It comes from the insecurity created by these narratives that men and women men oppress women. And that makes women who see themselves as victims, who are looking for a savior, who want a man to create the fiction that he's going to go toe-to-toe with the bully that hates women. Right? And if we want to get rid of this stuff from our politics, yeah, sure, we could try ending women's suffrage, but then women would have to vote to end women's suffrage, and good luck with that.
Yeah.
Or we can just hold the line and say, women need to take accountability, women need to take responsibility. And if the only thing we can do is make it so that we create a small community in which that holds true, then that's what we have to do, because that's the only thing that's going to get us through this. That's the only thing that's going to get, because again,
okay, if you think women aren't going to vote themselves out of the vote, right? How much do you think they're going to vote themselves more accountability?
Yeah, but that's the thing. We can't think about it in terms of all women, because what's the alternative? Just cede the floor? Right? Just be like, okay, well, we can't convince X number of women, so let's not do it at all. Even if we can only convince 1 woman, 2 women, 3 women, 12 women, right? Rome, Sabine women, there were I think maybe 30 of them, judging from the voting. They used the names of the Sabine women to to name their voting blocks. So, but a lot of them were just place names. Some were actual like female names. So those are the ones that they think were actual people or potentially, or at least legends. So how many do we need? But the thing is, if there's 0, then we have no hope, right? That's where I'm getting at.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we have limited time here. So
yes. Okay.
Allison,
So
Allison, I'm sorry to butt in, but Mr. Great Indoors tried to send a super chow. He's asking me to check it, but I don't see it in the
no, I don't see it
super chow,
either.
so it must have gotten stuck in the tubes.
Maybe
or
that
something.
that's a gigantic one that I had to refund got stuck in the tubes, gummed up the tubes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, let me just finish what how this guy responds to it. Now I'll find the super chow.
Hey, CC. And if it's the largest women's caucus in the Liberal Party's history, it is the largest women's caucus in the nation's history. And
their
we need
moral
to get
authority.
it even bigger in the next election.
It appear to you, as it appears to me, he doesn't even know what he wants to say.
Did you miss like David Creighton? He's a conservative No, he doesn't. He knows exactly what he wants to say. He's just basically called you guys a bunch of misogynists who don't care about women. All right. And how do you come back from that? When how much of the electorate is now women who basically voted him in power so he could go toe to toe with the big misogynist of the era? Like, am I making no sense? I don't know.
No, it's actually kind of amazing how that's the only thing that he noticed. Or he may have noticed the thing that we're talking about, but is just unwilling to talk about it.
Yeah, but this is why conservatives lose, because they can't create the emotional. They can't. They allow liberals to establish themselves as like the moral benchmark using this narrative, and they have nothing to defend against it except it's right there, right? In Christianity, which is a more conservative like position, people are people because they have free will, and they have free will because they can be evil. If you take away women's evil and you put them in the permanent situation of being victims, you are actually dehumanizing them. Right? And you're dehumanizing every group you put in that position. You're taking away their soul. And I know that that's a really difficult narrative to sell to women, but it's something that we need to do, because this is what happens when women don't take responsibility. This is what happens when we let them stay in the mentality of teenage girls. You end up with people like Carney who manipulate emotions in the moment, get in, and have absolutely no intention of making good on what they're saying. If he is willing to pretend to go toe to toe with the big misogynist bully, and at the same time he's kissing the ring, how can you trust him for anything? And then, I say this, and I know the women who voted for him because of that will hate me for it.
Yeah.
Instead of actually saying, hey, maybe my instinct, maybe my immaturity, how do I describe this in a way that doesn't immediately make people upset? Maybe my I don't know. I don't know how to do it. How do we do this? How do you sell something like that, Karen?
You tell her that you're never going to drive her to the hospital for another endoscopy ever again if she votes for the freaking NDP.
Yeah, that's it. All you can do is let them see a chasm of pain and say, hey, there's a solution to this.
Yeah, no, you can take an Uber to the thing and you can get one of your freaking retard NDP friends to drive you home. Right? And because, you know what? My riding went NDP last time. And it was because of retards like uninformed people like my mother-in-law, who was like, but I thought they were for the working class. And I'm like, they haven't been that since the 1990s. Right? Like, who do you think was pushing your union to agree with your employer to stick everybody with the jibby jabs? It was the NDP. They're like, oh yeah, no, union reps, union stewards, you need to go with this. It's for worker safety, right? If everybody's not vaccinated, we're all at risk, right? And it's an on the job hazard, and so everybody needs to get vaccinated, and so the union backed it, and it was just like, and she was, thank God. All I can say is thank God some freaking skank jumped her, right? And in the process of the takedown, right, my mother-in-law blew out her knee, and so she was like laid up and needed surgery, and that's when the lockdowns came, right, and her surgery was indefinitely postponed, and then so she couldn't go back to work, so she didn't have to take the fucking jab, but yeah, it was just like she phoned me, like when I told her this, she phoned me and she was just like so mad. She was so mad about the trucker protest in Ottawa being broken up. Like, how could he do that? How could he do that? And I'm like, how do you think he did that? He did that because he knew the NDP would ratify his decision, right? Like, I was like, I didn't say that. I said, who did you vote for last time? And she's like, long pause, NDP. And I'm like, yeah. So you got what you voted for. And now you're mad.
Yeah. And this is the thing. Like, it's how do you convince people of this, that this is not of benefit to anyone? And they say, like Mao said, women hold up half the sky. Well, then they have half the responsibility when the sky falls.
Yeah.
Right. And this is not good behavior. This is not why you want to vote someone in, because he made you feel something in the moment. He made you think he was going to go toe to toe with a big misogynist bully and protect your honor. And then what ended up happening is he was kissing that guy's ring whilst telling you that he was going to really stick it to him.
Yep.
Like, you got to pause there, because once you buy something like that, there's nothing you won't buy. And this guy does not have your best interests at heart.
Nope.
I mean, he does if you want to, you want to have more maid, I guess. If you want to avail yourself of a maid.
Yeah. Maid for kids.
And like, he's not trustworthy. Like, all right. Now, I will say that there is stuff that I definitely don't agree with what Trump is doing.
Oh yeah.
But at least you understand his motives, right?
Yeah.
Carney's like completely two-faced. I don't know if Trudeau is smart enough to be that two-faced, but but regardless, it's like I sort of, when I listened to, the other thing I wanted to cover was the throne speech. I know everybody has to go, but when I was listening to Charles just boliviate about net zero, and basically what King Charles did was he just took, he read out the Liberal platform, and I'm like, listening, this guy doesn't decide on this. Why is he reading it out?
Well, no, that's what the throne speech is a speech from the throne as to what the current government plans to do.
Okay, fair enough. That was just my ignorance. But it, at the same time, is why now? Like, and the thing is that, again, it just feels like, because Charles is a globalist, it just feels like all of the and we're going to deal with the economy and blah, it's just bullshit.
It's like the reason why he brought in King Charles, right, is because there are two automatic confidence votes, right? So for the listeners who don't know, a confidence vote is if it gets voted down by Parliament, by the House of Commons, right, then it triggers a snap election, right? And so there are two types of votes that are automatically considered confidence votes. One is the speech from the throne, right? And one is the budget, right? Which is why Carney brought in King Charles, because who's going to vote down King Charles? Am I right? He's like literally the king. Okay. And he wasn't going to table a budget. He's been shamed into tabling a budget in the fall, right? Okay. he should have had a budget already prepared to table during this first session, right? Table the budget, say how much money you're planning on spending for the next year and on what, okay? And then do a fall fiscal statement, because that's generally how it works. Spring budget, fall update on like what the financial situation is, right? So basically a budget and then an audit. Budget in spring, audit in fall, right? We haven't had a budget in ages. We did have a fiscal statement, which actually started the collapse of the Trudeau government, because his finance minister basically said, I cannot go in front of the Canadian people and read this fiscal statement to them, right?
So
because it's $63 billion more than anybody was expecting. We've spent $63 billion more this year than we told people we were going to spend, right? So I'm not going to do it. And she resigned as finance minister. And that's what started the dominoes toppling. And then Trump made the 51st state thing with the tariffs. And so that was just basically the end of Trudeau. He was like radioactive poop at that point for the Liberal Party, right? But Carney's an economist. Carney was the governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, right? He should be able to put a budget together and table it in the spring, right?
Sorry,
but he's not going to, because it's a confidence vote. And if it gets voted down, right, snap election, and he's going to be the shortest lived prime minister since Kim Campbell.
Okay, so basically what he's doing is stalling. So Canada hasn't even had a damn budget for how many, like almost a year now?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. So basically the people in charge of us have just had a blank check written by the Canadian citizens, and they just keep spending and spending and spending, no oversight. And the party that put that in place has just slapped a new puppet up, and he did a song and dance about, oh, hey, I'm going to put it up Trump. And now they're continuing with that, business as usual. And nobody has a problem with that from their party.
Well, even the CBC kind of was laughing at him, going like, are you freaking kidding me? You're not going to table a budget all year, right? You're going to do a fall fiscal statement in November or December, and then you're going to do a budget next spring, like in March or April. Really? Like, that is laughable. Even CBC and CTV and like the Toronto Star and all of these mainstream liberal media outlets that are bought and paid for by the fucking liberals were like, that is a fucking joke. Like, that's retarded. So he was like, okay, I'll do a fiscal statement in spring, and then I'll do a budget in the fall. I'll turn the entire sequence upside down, right? And
by then 3 years, no budget.
Yeah. And then 2.5.
2.5.
2.5 or 2 years and 8 months, something like that.
Okay. All right. So this is what we get. This is what we get because he successfully sold an emotion to women and men who are really invested in sticking it to misogynist bullies.
Yeah. No. Do you really think Polyev, right, the conservative leader,
the weird autist?
He's like us, Alison.
Yes.
But do you really think he didn't have a budget ready to go on day one?
Oh yeah. He should have just given it to freaking Carney and be like, just do it.
Yeah, just table this.
Yeah, I mean, you take everything else from our platform.
Yeah.
Just take our budget too. Although I'm not really happy with it just feels like the conservatives are rolling over like business as usual.
Carney's cabinet minister for housing, right? He literally said he wants more affordable housing, but he doesn't want house prices to go down.
And he also wants more immigration.
But it's like, I'm just like, okay, but you do understand that even if you bring in affordable housing that's different from the existing housing, so luxury condos and and nice big McMansions and things like that are super expensive, right? Single detached family homes that are super expensive in certain areas. If you bring in enough housing that's affordable, right, for the rest of the market, in order for like renters who want to, it's affordable enough that they can maybe rent it and save for a down payment for a home, right? Even if they're not buying these homes, right? The price of these homes, like that these people, they listen to the fucking Liberal government in 2022. The Liberal government was saying, oh no, you should buy a house now. Right? Because interest rates are really low, right? In late 2021 and early 2022, right? Interest rates are low. You should buy a house now. And housing prices aren't too bad. So a bunch of people took on all of this debt. And then when inflation skyrocketed by mid 2022, and then too late, the Bank of Canada upped interest rates to tame it, and now these people are saddled with like freaking houses that they'll have to sell at a loss, right? Because when they have to renew their mortgages, like for me, it'll be December 2026. But for a lot of these people, like these are $700,000 houses, right? And they're going to have to renew their mortgages in 2026 or 2027. And it's going to go from like 1.49% or whatever they paid, 1.89% mortgage rate to like 5%. Right. And it's just like, well, sucks to be you. You weren't thinking ahead. Right. And it's like when they offered us in December 2021, they offered us, because it was time to renew, they offered us 1.49% locked in for 5 years. I was like, take it. Right. And I did threaten to kill my husband in front of the bank rep because, like, it's like, I don't want to go in. So because I don't want to wear a mask. So I just sent him in to sign the papers. I had told them exactly what I wanted. And I sent him in to sign the papers. And then he phones me and he's like, they're showing me all these other options. And I'm like, don't sign anything. And I went in there and I was like, really, honey, do I have to? I told you 5 years, 1.49%, sign it and get the hell out. Right. But there's all these other options. Do I really have to kill you right here in this office in front of poor Raj here? He'll be traumatized for life. He's just trying to do his job and sell us on a freaking bullshit plan that's going to cost us more. Right? Sign it. Right? And Raj is just sitting there sweating. Right? His name tag says trainee.
Alison.
and he's
I know we have a super chow.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, that and I gotta go. I
know. Okay.
Okay.
I figured there was an end to the anecdote, and then the end
to the anecdote is we walk out of the bank, and Mike says, "Why you gotta be like that?" And I'm like, "Shut up, honey. We just robbed a bank."
Okay, so Great Indoors, Grand Strong gives us $10 and says, "Let me tell you about the net zero people. Today I went to a florist. Together with he's Dutch.
He's German, Dutch.
Yeah. With a colleague of mine to get something for another departing colleague. Afterwards, someone from another department informed us that buying flowers was bad for the environment because pesticides and fertilizer use. The guy also told me a couple months that overpopulation was a great risk. I replied that exact opposite was happening, and he said, well, it's not going fast enough. This guy has 2 kids as well."
Well, offer your kids maid.
Yeah.
Do your part.
Do your part.
Florist.
Do your part. They'll get made pamphlets that say, do your part for net zero. God, you know what's happening. Is that cynical? Is that too cynical?
No.
It's just cynical enough.
Well,
how about you with your coof cancer vampire bats?
Well,
oh shit! I shouldn't have gotten you started on that. All right.
They offer maid to anybody who's going to cost the healthcare system.
They'll offer maid to the coof cancer vampire bats too.
Yeah.
Eventually, or maybe they won't because
probably not.
Yeah. I mean, how would they be able to sign? Do they have fingers? I think they do. They do have fingers.
Well,
so they could sign.
Each of the like slats on their wings is a finger.
With respect,
Oh.
today, please. I'd like
Okay.
to
All
go.
right.
I have
All
to
right,
go.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for the abrupt end, and see you in the next one. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, put the comments below, and share, because sharing is caring. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.